Well, hello, and welcome back to the Marketing Gateway. My name is Sean in St. Louis, and today we have part two of our interview with Jolene Sherman, who rose through the ranks, starting out as a seventh grade science teacher, working at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch newspaper, rising up to be the head of their internal creative agency, and eventually taking over a position at a startup called Fluency, where she's now in charge of business development and enterprise solutions. Jolene is also a student in the SIUE MBA program right now. And I know that because she was in my class and I got to know her through there without even knowing that she had this awesome marketing background. So I think you're going to really enjoy this second part. You're going to get to hear about some of the excitement and frustrations of marketing today. You're going to get to hear about how she and her team in my class came up with this incredible pitch for Little Debbie's oatmeal cream pies. It's going to be fun. Here we go. So let's now fast forward to the fall, to this fall, where you've transitioned to working for this startup that you're working for now, and you're also working on your MBA, which is again how you and I met. So how have things changed for you?
Yeah, so it's been a pretty pivotal change, right? So, and I think, especially because I did spend 20 years really with the same company, because when I started with Lee Enterprises in 2005, they had just purchased the Post Dispatch. So, a lot of times people are like, well, who's Lee? And it's like, well, that's always been kind of the parent company of the Post, at least in my tenure, with the company. Very, very fortunate though, that I had the opportunity to do so many different things. Like I said, it kind of really fit my personality, which is like, hey, what's the next new challenge? And not everybody has that opportunity. And what I mean by that, Sean, is sometimes folks have to like leave a company and do, to get those new challenges. And so I was always so grateful to the leadership of Lee, and especially the folks I worked directly for, that they were able to kind of meet me where I was at. And I got to spend 20 years doing a lot of really cool and great things. But what I'd realized is there were some professional development opportunities that I just knew that if I was going to do another 20 years, right, I'm at the kind of pivotal midpoint of my career, that I needed to do some soul searching and think about what I wanted to do. And so when I made the decision to leave, it was a tough one. I like I said, I'd run the agency, I'd earned my way kind of into the C-suite. I presented to our board of directors. There was a lot of things that if you looked at a resume, someone would say, "Oh my gosh, why would you want to leave?" But I knew that I wanted to challenge myself in new and different ways. So had a great parting, if you will, with Lee Enterprises, and I took some time off this summer, which I was joking with some of my friends. I had not taken a summer off since I was 11 years old because I started babysitting at the age of 12. So I'm like, what does one do in the summer when they're not working? But it was really great. I got to spend some time with the family. As I mentioned, my boys are, now 21 and 16. So, that time is very precious when we can be together. So fast forward, I had a good family friend that said, "Hey, Jolene, have you heard of the Wedge Innovation Center that had opened in Alton?" And I had, because Alton, Illinois, my hometown, is not very big. And they're like, "You need to go tour the Wedge and just meet the folks down there. I think you would think it's cool." So I went down, I took a tour, and it's a co-working space and there's private offices, but it's much more than that. That's kind of the core of the real estate, but it's much more than that in the sense that it's really a community where we're trying to bring in, smart people, talented people, local community folks to really just help innovate and build around the small businesses that do make up Alton, and really bigger than Alton, like the Riverbend, kind of Metro East area. So I sort of fell in love with the idea. And part of what they were working towards was, some AI innovation around kind of helping small businesses be able to adapt. And that was some of the work I was doing at the kind of tail end of my career with Lee. So I had a passion for that. And that led to a conversation with the SIUE's dean, Mario, the School of Business. And he's like, "Have you thought about teaching?" And I'm like, "Well, I was a teacher. I was a science teacher, but he's like, "Well, you thought about doing like maybe being an adjunct professor?" I was like, "I would love to do that." And he's like, "Well, do you have your MBA?" And I said, "No." It's like, I just went into my career. And so he's like, "Well, SIUE and their partnership, because they power part of the Wedge Innovation Center. they have some grad assistantships. Maybe maybe we could figure out a way to make this work, because I was going to do some advising for the wedge anyway. And they said, well, if you're interested in getting your MBA, you should consider it. And so that's literally kind of how this all came together was, okay, I can make both of these things work. I can give my time to, of course it's part time, it's partial time to the wedge. And then I can work on my MBA, which is something I always wanted, just life got in the way. And then I also had the opportunity in all of this to start what I call was my full-time job, which is working for a really amazing, like you mentioned, startup company. They're located out of Vermont. They're called Fluency, and they are ad operations technology. So I went from being on kind of the advertising and marketing side, someone who purchased software like this to help our operations, to now being on the software side where I can take this solution to people like me in my old life. So yeah, like a 180. Like I just like woke up one day and said, hey, let's do a new job. Let's go back to school. Let's do all of the things. So it's been an interesting summer and kickoff to fall, to say the least. But I'm really excited about it. So
It's always good to go back to school at some point and to find out how much things have changed since you went back originally, or
yes,
went originally. And I know for
yes,
me, being on the teaching side, and maybe you will be one day too, I many of the things that I teach in marketing now are things that we hadn't even conceived of when I was a student. Like they
yeah.
just weren't things we were talking about. And so it really does keep you sharp, and it really helps you to see the world differently. But then you can still rely on that experience you have too.
Right. Yeah. But, and I think I might have mentioned this, Sean, when you and I were talking
Hmm.
previously, it's like having the 20 years of practical experience without without really the like, the theory, I guess, like what we learn in a more traditional, program. I've enjoyed learning the theory because there's actually been plenty of times, and now I'm in like my strategic decision making class is the one I'm in right now, and there's things that I'm learning, and I'm like, oh man, like I would have liked sort of the structure of the theory to apply to some of these decisions we were making in real time. Because not to suggest they were just being made from like gut, like there's plenty of data that was helping, but there is that practical meets the theory that you learn in a more regimented education program, clearly, that bring the two things together. So it's been fun. Kind of, I'm probably doing it the reverse, but it's been fun to go about it, because I just have those experiences that I can apply and be like, yeah, like I would have done this probably a little differently now, knowing what I know now from my MBA program. So
When I was at SIUE working on my business degree, I dropped out of journalism school, gone into some other things for a while, done some product marketing, done some PR. I was in a completely different place from a lot of the students that I was in class with, because I had, everything we were learning about, I had a practical connection to.
yeah,
And many of them had, especially at the undergraduate level, they had never had a job, or maybe they worked a
right,
part-time
yeah,
job, but
yeah,
never really seen what the world was like. So sometimes having that ability to connect is really valuable, because
yeah,
you can take a framework that you just learned and say, oh, well, this would have been great to have then, and now I know how to use it now. So
yes,
you kind of have a leg up on
yeah.
working with everyone to kind of show how it can be put together. Well, are you having any other adventures in terms of working with Fluency and applying this background that you have? Like, are people surprised when they find out what you've done or what you're learning?
They are. Yeah, I think they are. Especially, the team at Fluency is amazing. And they're very supportive, knowing, I'm working on my MBA. And then when I meet people kind of through my MBA program, and especially when they're like, oh, you're helping at the wedge, you're a grad assistant. I'm like, yes, the world's oldest grad assistant. But it's fun that everyone's really supportive, and like you said, I think it does surprise people sometimes when they're like, wait a second, what did you do for the last 20 years? Um, but I do think it's interesting, and especially I'll talk kind of just for a moment on taking my practical experience, even within media advertising, an agency, and moving into the software side. It probably is, people would say, well, yeah, of course, but it really is an interesting approach when you've taken that type of technology and had to implement it into your other, your whole workflow. And I think that sometimes, software companies, they've created a solution for a certain need, right? And so my experience allows me to say, hey, this is an amazing solution. I wouldn't be working there if I didn't think it was. But this is how it has to connect with everything else, kind of upstream and downstream. And I think that practical experience of having to kind of operate a whole agency, operate everything from, lead generation and sales to the actual onboarding, and then the campaign going live, and then did we perform, and then on and on. That experience really helps, I think, now that I brought that to the company I'm at now, to say, okay, here's where we fit and what we solve, but let's be thoughtful of what's happening before and after, because that's going to make us better consultants and, really a better vendor of the folks that need to use our technology. Right. Because you've probably experienced this, Sean, in the work you do. I know I've experienced it. It's like, you'll have someone trying to sell you something, whether it's technology or whatever. And you're like, you don't even understand, like, yeah, okay, great, your software is amazing, but like, you don't understand what's happening before or after. Like, you're causing me more problems than you're solving, right? So I do think that helps me in what I'm doing now. Certainly, I think it also lends credibility to the fact that, like, I made a technology decision and then decided to go work at that company. So clearly there's a bit of a stamp of approval that, like, this is a good solution. And then what the work that I'm doing, through my MBA and within the wedge, that kind of just brings it all together. I've always been, someone who really fundamentally believes that, like, if we can help small businesses grow and succeed. Clearly, when I worked, more directly with businesses, when I was at the Post Dispatch, I believed in that, like, that community, supporting our local communities through journalism, through commerce, through the things that we need to do locally, is what makes, our society, strong, and makes it thrive. And it's these connection points. So that is one of the things that I promised myself when I decided to take the leap and go into something new, is I still wanted to stay kind of true to that core of what, kind of gets me excited and the work that I want to do, and just making sure I don't get too disconnected from that. So, and I feel really fortunate that is a common thread. Even though I'm doing a lot of different things now, is still a common thread in kind of the work that I believe in doing. So,
Well, I definitely understand. And by the way, I've had those software salespeople call me, and they are so excited to get into their spiel that they don't listen to what my needs are.
right,
And have I
right.
bought software from any of them? Never, because
Yes.
I don't care about their spiel. I care about how they can help me, and if they
Yeah.
can't listen to what my needs are, they're not going to be very successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that should be the, the press release for all software sales, is it's like, take a minute, really understand what someone needs. And then if your solution can't help, say it can't help, but more than likely it can. You just have to be able to translate that into, a practical application for someone, like you said, that's going to fit their needs, isn't just the spiel on the box, so to speak. So yeah.
Well, speaking of frustrating experiences like that, are there any other things you can think of that frustrates you in the world of marketing?
I mean, I think that, probably what frustrates us all, and I was kind of laughing about this, everyone's like, oh man, like, I would do anything to avoid ads. Uh, and I'm like, no, we need ads. Like, businesses need ads. We need to be able to, help support, and get messaging out for our local businesses, for our big businesses too. But, those services and those products need some sort of platform. So I would say what I would encourage people, to think about when with marketing, and it's like, hey, if you're really feeling, bothered by ads, um, what we as marketers could do to help ease that pain is to really be thoughtful that we're getting the right message in front of the right person. Because you've probably experienced, if you're seeing a message that is relevant to you, it doesn't feel like an ad. It feels like content, right? It feels like an ad when it's intrusive or bothersome or isn't something you're interested in. So I think that's a challenge for marketers, especially as the technology continues to evolve. How do we make sure that we're serving the right message, at least in the spirit of that? What I also would encourage folks to do is to remember that, content isn't free. Someone is working to produce that content and working really hard to produce that content. So, I think that if you don't want a disrupted experience with ads, then be willing to pony up and pay for it, because that is an economy of scale that we need to think about. So I would say that those are sort of the two things that frustrate me, is that folks want free content, and they don't want to see ads. It's like you got to kind of pick and choose which one you want, and be open to the fact that ads can be good and helpful if done the right way. So
it never fails to amaze me when I'm doing advertising testing, concept testing, or resonance testing, how people will come into a focus group or come into an interview and tell me, oh, I don't listen to ads, I don't pay any attention. And then they will start quoting them without even realizing that they're quoting
yeah,
them. And sometimes you'll ask them, well, where did you hear that? Oh, I heard it in an ad.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They completely think that they don't pay attention to them, and yet they do. And we've
yeah,
done tagline testing where we find out if they know taglines, and a lot of them do. They don't
yeah,
always know where they came from, but they know that they've heard them. We've done testing where we've asked people, where they go for sources of information, and they'll tell us they want direct mail, or, they
yeah,
want websites that they can go to that have content, that's going to tell them
yeah.
things. Well, that's ads.
That
So
that's ads. Yeah,
it's very funny how I think the word carries a lot of stigmatization, but the actual method of communication, as you're saying, it is useful.
yeah.
It just means that you have to match the message to what people are looking for, and not just try to get their attention by being noisy and disruptive and annoying, but not really useful to them.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think that that's one of the reasons why, even local advertising is so important. And, and the ability to help support those local businesses and get their message out. Because if you think about it, if you think about your own day-to-day life, right? Like, if a local restaurant is going to offer a special and it's relevant to you and your family, that doesn't feel like an ad. That feels like, man, they just helped me out. They told me that it's like, buy one, get one free this weekend. Like, that's helpful to me as someone who's feeding a family of four, right? It doesn't feel that way. So it's like, how do you, keeping that communication and that openness to the fact that, like, really local businesses in particular, their advertising messages really can be very useful content, to those of us who live in these communities. And I think you said it really well. It's like, if you get it out there in the right way, it doesn't feel disruptive. A lot of times I think some of the more disruptive ones are the ones that are sort of like those big national, companies that are just trying to get your attention. But, really, which is one of the reasons I think I have such a soft spot for like local advertising, local journalism, community, where we can really help those local businesses thrive. So
Absolutely. When we're having an event in the Metro East, for example, where we both live, and
yeah,
it's, oh, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know the Italian Fest was this weekend. I didn't know the chili cook-off was this weekend.
yeah,
It's useful, right? And so people pay attention
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, exactly.
I wanted to talk about our class for a minute. So we're in this marketing class, this marketing strategy for MBA students. And I'm just curious, as someone who has been working in the field and who got to listen to the more academic side of things, what really struck you about how the practice of marketing differs from the ideals of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and you actually would say that you said this a couple times in class, and I remember like smiling when you said it, which is that a lot of times in corporate America, the the importance or the power that they give to a marketing department isn't always what it should be. Meaning, like, if academically, if you're thinking about the power of what a marketing department could be versus what you see practically, right? And so that is something that I think we struggled with, especially within the media landscape, probably because of the change. But a centralized kind of marketing division, everything was sort of happening at the hyper local level. And without some of that connectivity, we did struggle, I think, with what I call consistent messaging throughout. Definitely, they've done some things to change that over time, but that was one of the things that hit me sort of the strongest was, okay, yeah, like, you'd be like, a lot of times a corporate won't invest in, these resources for marketing. And I would laugh and I'd be like, yep, that is true. Like that is 100% true. So that, I think, is one of the things that hit me the strongest, is it's like really what a fully developed marketing team could be and should be versus where those resources sometimes get, parsed back or pared back, as you're trying to make a budget, run a company, all of those things. So
It's true in any field. It's true even
yeah,
in what I do, which has got a very academic grounding in the research side of things. So,
yeah,
well, I remember our last class session, your team got assigned these little Debbie oatmeal cream pies. I gave you guys a box of them, and I challenged you to find a new market for them. And
Yeah.
your team came up with this incredible idea. I remember you were joking about how you were going to call up the company the next day and tell them how they could market this product because you got so excited about this. So walk me through your idea that you had, and is little Debbie missing out on a key market by not doing this?
Yes, I definitely think they are. So hopefully they'll watch this podcast, and Sean, you and I can take our careers in a totally different direction. Um, so when we got the assignment, doing a quick research, it was Little Debbie themselves says that the best way to eat an oatmeal cream pie is after 15 seconds in the microwave, which I did not know because as a child growing up, they just got thrown in my lunchbox and you just ate them room temperature or maybe even cold. So our team got to thinking about this idea of like serving warm oatmeal cream pies as like a dessert as part of this like fancy dinner party, right? So like the idea is it's not just for lunch boxes anymore, that this is something that adults could enjoy, and it could really be this upscale, experience. And so, we had a lot of fun with that by saying, here, you've got this, china on the table, fancy dinner, and then you show the hostess, throwing these oatmeal cream pies into the microwave for 15 seconds and like all of her dinner party just being thrilled with this option as a dessert. So yeah, I do. I do think they're missing a key demographic. I had no idea that's how you're supposed to eat an oatmeal cream pie. And I think there's a lot of money that Little Debbie can make in this new approach.
I love it. It cracked me up when you guys did that, and it was so brilliant because it was on the box. It was something that they recommended that they're just not
Yeah.
following through on.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing. So that class there were a lot of international students because they have to attend so many hours in person. And I asked many of them when I was handing out snack foods that night if they would eat any of those at home or give those to their children. And they almost all told me no.
Yeah.
They said they're too sweet and Americans eat too much sugar.
Yeah. Yes. I would say that without a lot of empirical research, that is just true. That is very true. Yes.
Well, one thing I do at the end of every episode is I ask every guest to plug something. So you can plug anything you want. Here's your chance. You're a marketer. What would you like to plug?
Oh my gosh. Well, I definitely, for anyone watching who needs, support in operating their third-party digital media, my new company, Fluency, is amazing for that. But if that's not your space, I'm going to plug two things. So I'm going to cheat a little bit.
Sure.
And I highly, highly recommend that you check out the Wedge Innovation Center in Alton, Illinois, because it's a great place for community. And especially if you're a new business and want a community to grow and thrive, I think you'll find it really interesting. So two very different ends of the spectrum, but both I think could be helpful to those who might be listening to our podcast today.
And I'll put the website for both in the show notes too, so people can check those
Thank
out.
you. Yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much, Jolene. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, likewise. Again, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am so grateful to Jolene for being on the Marketing Gateway. And, part of the reason that I'm doing this show is to connect people like myself and her together, because I had no idea when she was sitting in my classroom what an awesome and incredible marketing career she had, because I just don't know that many marketers in St. Louis. I'd like to know more. And to think that she was working for one of the most visible and important creative agencies in the area, expanding out to 70 different markets, and that we had never met before that opportunity, really goes to show why we need to spend more time listening to each other. And so we're going to continue to do that here on the Marketing Gateway. And I want to encourage you, if you are in St. Louis or the Midwest and you are interested in being a guest on this show, please reach out to us. Go to themarketinggateway.com and let us know. We would love to feature you on the show. We'd love to hear more from other marketing mentors in the area and learn from each other. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Sean in St. Louis. This has been the Marketing Gateway. See you next time.